Howdy, everybody. This is Thomas Talbert with the Leasing Austin podcast. I have with me today Mr. Richard Cahan, who has been my eviction attorney for, gosh, I guess it's probably 4 years, almost on the dot at this point. Richard, how you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Kids are home from school, so that's fun.
Oh, good. It's a loud household. Yeah, we're filming this right now on December 22nd, so right before the holidays. But Richard, before we get into all the fantastic work you have done for me and a bunch of other property managers and other landlords here in Austin, I want to hear a little bit more about you. Can you tell me how you got into the space?
Well, it really starts with my grandfather raised me in the summers, so I spent a lot of time with him. He was the county handyman back in North Carolina, and so I spent a lot of time with him. So fast forward to after law school and all that, looking for, what was I going to do? I started out with the pro bono VLS people on an eviction defense, and that's how I got, into evictions. And then with the background with my grandfather, did a little bit more, obviously, landlord side and could help them, you know, fix up things afterwards and whatnot. And so I was able to build the practice from there. And now basically all we do is evictions, some probate, ground in estate planning, but not currently doing that.
Well, that's fantastic. About how many evictions do you handle a year?
That's a good question. And we're trying to get that information. And it depends on what your metric is. Is it by notices to vacate each month? We're doing a couple hundred. Is it ones that go to trial or whatnot? I don't have a good metric on that. We're past at least 1,000 full evictions in the last 10, 15 years, obviously. I feel safe doing that. Beyond that, we don't have the information to that.
Information out, but man, several hundred notices a month. I mean, that's still an impressive feat, which honestly for me is the most important job is getting those notices out. I have found that as a property manager, the tenants aren't necessarily scared of me telling them I'm going to evict you, but when it says the law officer Richard Cahan and that notice hits their door, all of a sudden they shape up really fast. Well, Richard, for your expertise, I would love to leverage your thoughts on the new laws coming out concerning landlords and specifically around evictions, et cetera, that are came out recently around Austin and Texas in general. Can you shed some light on some of those new laws and what your 2 cents is on those things coming out?
Certainly. I'm actually maybe the most negative on those new laws. I think the process we had in place was great. Everybody understood it. It was straightforward as long as you knew what you're doing and didn't play any games. And that's one thing. We never play games. We do everything, my value is that the judges know I'm not playing games and in there we did what we said we're going to do, and we've always proven it and never had any issues. The new laws really, to me, everybody's all excited about them and thinks that they're going to do good things. I disagree with that. Start with the new squatter law, as people are kind of calling it. I don't see any value in that maybe in the last 10 years, I may have been able to use it twice if we had it in place. But you have to have no idea who it is, no idea how they got in there, had no involvement in them getting in, so you couldn't left the door unlocked and things like that. Just such rare ability to use that law. The other one, they changed the way we do evictions, and not to the positive. Everybody's all excited about it, but the wording, if you actually get in there with an attorney view on the wording, I'm seeing openings for tenants to fight these more. Such things as reasonably calculated for the tenant to see it. Well, if you have any idea that they're not checking their mail, now we can't mail because it's not reasonably calculated for them to see it. So we're still studying it. I started obviously reading that law when it passed in June, read it probably 6-10 times then and kind of put it down. And now we're up against it coming into effect January 1 and really paying attention of what that does. And right now, I don't think we're going to change anything. We're going to do everything extremely conservative for the next 6 months until we read each judge, how are they doing things and whatnot. Because normally I like to play it to the lowest denominator. What's the harshest judge, and we do that everywhere just so then we know, there's no issues. But they took away posting on the outside of the door, which I didn't like anyways, supposedly, although my read on the law, as it was passed by the legislature, didn't do that. at least to my reading so far. But their version of the statutes took those away. You can leave it. You don't have to post it on the inside of the door. You can leave it on the kitchen counter now. I think some minor changes like that. But I think overall the wording changes are going to cause tenants to be able to have more fight, and the judges are going to be more listening, at least for the next 6 months.
Just more ambiguity in that process, which of course nobody likes. I've always liked the way you've done it, which is you've sent them certified letters via the mail through us, because it was just so easy to be able to say, yes, you got it, and here it all is. It's crazy to think that someone could potentially argue, well, I don't check my mail, or I don't get mail, or something like that, to that effect. And get rid of that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but I remember hearing about one of these laws getting passed in which an email was going to be sufficient to be able, as notice to evict. Is that true?
It is. It's in the law. It has to be in the lease, agreed to. And I'm 6 months. I'm going to advocate that we at least mail everything the same as we were doing before. We already emailed as soon as we saw the notice was there, depending on if it was a 1-day notice, then we emailed immediately. If it was a 30-day, we might have waited a little bit. So now we'll email immediately once we see the mailing has been delivered. My preference is if we can give them a few days to check their mail, and then we can get them reach out, but it does happen rarely. So it's nice when you can get it, but I don't know it's worth on 100% of the cases trying to delay it a couple days for that. But now if we can get the tenant so I think the main change for landlords is if we get the tenant to say, I got it, that's all that matters. We can post it on the outside of the door and the tenant says, I saw your notice. Now we've got them. So that's nice. If we can get the judge to go along with that.
To go along with that too. Well, and of all these fancy softwares nowadays, for example, I use Appfolio, and when I send stuff through Appfolio, I can see, or at least the software tells me, if I can see that's been delivered. I can see if it's been opened or not, or if there's a link embedded in there. I can see if they've clicked on the link or something like that. I am not technical enough to use the right nomenclature on that, but I would imagine that would give us a fighting chance to be able to use emails in court. Although I think that, like you said, we're going to keep it the exact same way until someone tells us differently in court.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If you've got that where you can show that they clicked on it or opened it, or at least we have something that shows, that they did. The main thing is it has to be in the lease, agreed to in the lease. And I don't know that the standard lease has that wording yet, or has been implemented. So that's going to be part of what we're looking at more too.
No, I hope that they'll change something here coming up in the new lease. I know that the Texas Board of Realtors just put forth a new management agreement with the Texas Board of Realtors, and I know that's coming out. I got another question for you, Richard. So we use the Texas Board of Realtors standard TAR lease in all of our leasing agreements. I would love to hear if there is a specific wording or article in that you would like to see changed. I'm sure as a lawyer, you probably have several things you'd like to change about it, but I'll just ask about one right now.
Yeah, I know there have been some things that would have been nice, but the TAR lease is the standard. I get clients all the time asking me for a copy of leases. Want me to draft a lease, and I'm like, go find a real estate agent or get your property manager and use the TAR lease. That is, the judges know it. It's like 90% in my estimation of what we see. So, it's just so standard. It does have everything. What I see a lot is some, add-ins that are already in there, which then you risk is the wording different. And now we got conflicts or whatnot. But, the only thing that's standing out that I can think of off the top of my head was, now this was a decade ago, Landlord got sued about the military, being able to terminate for military, and the wording in the TAR lease gave more or something, and we had to fight that. And I remember taking note of wanting to do something with that. But there's just unique situations that where any of these any parts of the lease is in there. We saw something weird with a pool, or I don't know what, but I don't have anything specific. It's the main thing is filling it out properly, checking all the boxes. What I see often is like termination period, what's that, section B is not checked. There's 2 boxes there, and then neither's checked, and now we got to play with both basically, or give more time than maybe we would otherwise. And unauthorized occupants, that's a hard one of 3 days. probably is a good one. I haven't settled on a thing, but often we see 14 days. Well, how do we prove somebody's been there every night for 14 days? All they have to do is go away for one night. Now they're no longer comply.
Take the clock on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some things like that. What they have is good. I'm sure there's something we could tighten up, and I can study my cases that we've done, and I have a plan to do that. Just haven't found the time yet.
Right. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, if you're sending out if you're several hundred notifications to vacate every single month, I mean, I bet you find yourself pretty darn busy. Concerning evictions and just the mistakes that you have seen over the course of your tenure doing evictions for a living, what is maybe the number one most common mistake you see for landlords when handling these evictions?
It's, I don't want to call it, I don't know the right term, but giving more time. The second they're late, it's one thing, have a set date. It doesn't have to be the second of the month. Rent's due on the first. That's the one thing I hear often is, rent's not due. There's a grace period. There's not. If you're using TAR lease, rent's due on the first, unless you specifically filled that section out differently. But have a set date, the 5th, the 10th, 15th, whatever it is. Start the process. Then, it doesn't matter what's going on. Not to be heartless, and as I often have the conversation with tenants, it's not that I don't care about your situation or you. I care about you the same as anybody else. But our side of things is the landlord, and they're losing money. So unless there's a solid plan, and preferably with this written agreement, get the process going, because you can always stop at any point in time. Even when the constable's on the doorstep, we've had a couple, we're there with the crew and the constable's there and we're ready to put them out to the street, and they come up with the money and pay everything at that point. So, up to that moment, you can always work it out, but you can't get the time back. And that's one thing I see. Even today, I had one who I want to give them till, Wednesday to see if they pay some. And unfortunately, the statistics say they're not going to pay, and we just lost 2 days.
100%. I could not agree with you more on that. Even from my own experience, when some tenant reaches out to me like on the 15th, 15 days before they have to pay their rent, and say, hey, like, there's this situation, and like, I'm gonna be late on the rent. Are you able to work with me? Any time I have ever tried to work with a tenant that way and let the balance build up, it just becomes a mountain that they can't climb. And if we would have acted faster and just done our standard process, they would have been forced to solve the problem much earlier than I allowed it. And I mean, that's a mistake that even I have fallen prey to as well. That's what I tell people all the stinking time is do it. Have a consistent date on which you send your process out. It has to be cold turkey. And as I think mine with you, I think between the 5th and the 7th, depending on weekends, is when we're sending all our documents to you and getting that process started. Powering through to the next part, and of course what everybody is going to be interested to hear from you, Richard. What is a few stories of the nightmare situation evictions that you've had to deal with? And obviously I imagine you can't share some details with us, but to the best that you can, I want to hear something that you've had to deal with that I probably haven't even seen yet.
Right. Yeah. And the good thing about most of what I'm doing is already public knowledge. So as long as I don't use specific details, and you can suss out who it is. But I'd say the worst I had, and I have a video of this. I don't know if the client ever gave me permission to use it, but I think I even have it posted on our YouTube. The worst condition was a family member renting from, the family. And evidently there was a leak underneath the sink for years, and he didn't tell anybody. He wouldn't let anybody in the house or anything. He finally, they needed to move him out, or he stopped paying. I don't remember the details. We had to evict him from this place. And it was floor to ceiling, walls, everything, black mold, entire place. Order situation. Yeah. So the whole house had to be torn down, or at least torn down to the I can't think of the term now, studs. So that they lost hundreds of, $200,000 in this situation. But we had to evict him to get him out of this place. And I went in with the constable in a full hazmat suit and have a video of this walking around, just hoarder stuff, a whole room full of, alcohol bottles and solo cups and just craziness. So I think that's the worst case I've seen. Most of the time we don't see much damage or whatnot once we've got started. Normally it's already been there. Oh, I had another thought. Oh man, I had another one in my head when I first started on that, and I can't. It slipped away. Maybe it'll come back.
Well, I remember
Uh,
that's crazy. And I always tell people, like with family members and stuff, I'm like, you need to still run their background check and have the signed lease. Like, as heartless as that may seem, funnily enough, that's where we see a lot of troubles. Is we've had people come to us, not even a lawyer yet, and say, "Man, Uncle Ted is living in my house, and he's just been a pain. And I just need him out. What do I do?" And they they know the answer, but they don't want to hear it. Almost like, "Well, you got to evict Uncle Ted," and it's crazy how they have to get over that loop there. Which, wow. And man, I remember the one where it was the first time I'd actually ever used you for an eviction. It was the first one I've ever had to deal with, and I hired you to help me to handle. And you actually came out and met me at that one. That one was one of, I'm sure, chump change to you, but to me, I was walking around like, I cannot believe that people live like this. It was just flabbergasting.
yeah, yeah. There's the ones where roaches falling from the ceiling and everything as you're trying to move stuff out. Oh my goodness. I did remember the other one. You actually remind me perfectly of when you're getting a new tenant, and the number one thing is the ID. The background check is good, but that's only so good. In-person viewing of that ID to make sure it's a real one, no paper IDs or anything like that. We see a lot of the fraud going on using other people's identification and checking the court records of whatever county you're in, whatever county they say they're coming from and that you're seeing. We chased a couple families around, evicted them multiple times, and our problem is we don't know who their next victim is until they're already there. So the best thing we could do is saying, hey, here's the situation of these people. Be ready the second they're late to jump on it, and because you don't want to deal with them, they're going to make it hard as it is.
No, and man, speaking of fraud, recently, I feel like it has become rampant. There has been, for us, several people that have tried to use our listings to post on Craigslist or something like that and move other families in. And other times when, we've had to deal with fake IDs and all this crazy things. What are you seeing on your side of things? I imagine you're getting to see, we're catching a lot of these things in the act of stopping them before anything truly bad happens. I imagine once they get to you, it's in full force. What's some of the things that you're seeing some of these people do to manipulate the facts to occupy properties, etc.?
Yeah, again, the ID is number one. In-person viewing of the ID. Don't take the scan or whatnot. I know that adds a layer to everything. It makes it more complicated. I think that's number one. What I see often is the payment. That's the really hard one. The initial payment, or once they've fallen behind and that payment to catch up. Really cash. Meeting at the bank to get a cashier check. Watch it be printed and take it from them right there. Wire transfer, I guess, and some of these other sites, I guess, I don't know their terms so much, so they make me a little bit more not lenient, leery, that's the word. But Venmo or whatnot, because any of these that you can, have the money taken back, you don't want anything like that for the initial payment or a catch-up payment. I've seen several with credit cards. I don't know if you guys do at all, but I had one client, I don't think it was you guys, I think it was a different property manager. 6 months worth of rent was disputed and taken back. And for the property manager, they've already sent that out to the client, to the owner. So they were out 6 months of rent. So really, yeah, that's the difficulty. I would say never do a credit card whatsoever, and verified funds, because cashier checks and money orders can be fraud. We see that enough. One tenant used
Really? How do they do that?
I don't know the process. Yeah, I don't know that I want to know the process, but we had one tenant appeal in the county court, and the payment to the court was a fraudulent money order.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So that's how they got
how
caught.
do we
He
defend that?
used a fraudulent money order to appeal it. That is hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't follow up with them if they did any sort of criminal thing or went after them, but and then we're stuck. They got their appeal. They're up in the county court, whatever delay is. I think that was Williamson County, so at least there wasn't really much of a delay. But that's supposed to protect the landlord. But if they pull something like that, nothing that we can do to to take it back. It's faster to go forward with the trial at that point.
No, funnily enough, I don't think I was the client you're talking about, but there was someone who was doing credit card fraud, and they were, I guess someone else's credit card, and then those people were reporting it as a, like they didn't know what this charge was, but they did that it was like 30 days into their lease. So we were able to jump on really, really fast and cut that out. The second I turned on to their portal of, no, we were only accepting money orders, they moved out real quickly because, I'm pretty sure that was your recommendation to get them out of there. Are you not seeing any squatters of any kind? Because I know the recent law actually was talking about how, it's quicker to evict squatters. We've actually seen a lot of listing fraud, I'll say, people trying to use our listings and put them on Craigslist to try and get people to sign a lease and a deposit and et cetera. Have you seen any of those cases yet?
So interesting. We saw a lot of that in San Antonio for a period of time. I don't remember if that's about 6 months ago. There was, somebody was doing that heavily to one of our clients at least. And, I don't think that falls under that law. So that's the thing is, if you look at the law, and it's kind of scary because, you go straight to the constable with an affidavit saying you swear to these things and whatnot, but you can't know who the person is. It can't be a family member. It can't be somebody who's been put in there by somebody that you knew. It can't be your tenant. Got a subtenant in there, and that's how they gained entry or whatnot. So on one side, you can't have any idea about who they are, but how do you know if you qualify if you don't know some things? It's just, I think my plan is, if a case seems like it's going to go that route, we may draft the paperwork for the person, but have them be the ones who, obviously swear to it and file it directly themselves, at least, till we see how that goes. But, my reading was just, like I said, I may have had two cases in the last 10 years that, in my opinion, may have met that qualifications. But yeah.
No, so I guess to reiterate, you really haven't seen any real squatter evictions when someone has placed a tenant in a household under false pretenses. Yeah, you guys have not seen that?
I've seen a couple for sure, but I don't know that qualifies under that law. If you read it, they didn't gain, they had to have some sort of, bad act themselves. Like, they broke in through the door and got in, and there was no sort of color of title, as we would say in other type of cases. It really has to be a vagrant, got in and, completely unknown. And even then, if you're wrong, don't be.
Right. No, and it's tough. And we actually had somebody who was trying to, we have these smart locks on our properties, and the codes change all the time. And, if someone were to come in and schedule a showing, it's different from the person who's 30 minutes behind them. They're two separate codes, so that you can't reuse the codes, etc. We had somebody that was trying to gain access for somebody else to access the property, and our system wasn't letting them do it. And so that we were actually talking to them before we realized, holy cow, this is a scam. And, thankfully our lock boxes were catching stuff like that. But, the codes that we all used to have as realtors, it's the old fad now because of stuff like this, sadly. But I mean, we used to just have like a standard code that we put on all our lock boxes. And it was like, oh, if you give us a copy of your ID, etc., and license number, here's the code, and you go see it. Well, that code wouldn't change. And that just worked for years and years and years, until recently we've had to go to a more secure way make sure those lock codes can change to make sure no one else can get back in. And it's funny, we never had any faults with the old system. We just switched before any of this happened, thankfully, so we didn't have to run into any of that. But there's been 2 occasions where there's someone that was targeting our listings, trying to pose as a realtor or the property owner or something like that, and gain access to the home. And it was eye-opening first to even just think, I cannot believe people are doing this. And if it's someone physically here, that's even more daunting. Of like, I don't know how. And talking to the police, man, after we figured out what was going on and we found the listings on Craigslist and reported them as spam and took them down, etc. Well, we basically took all that information to the cops and we're like, hey, here's the incident. Like, I don't really know how to file this. What should we do? And they took the information and were like, yeah, we can't do much here. Like, y'all, y'all basically stopped him from committing a crime. And like, we can't, and also there's no way for you guys to find out who it is. Then it was super frustrating because that we just felt helpless. It was like, okay, well, our best defense is, or our best defense here is to just not let anyone in the homes. It was
right. Unintended at all. Going back to that, yeah. Cameras. I think cameras are the number. I've been saying that for years now. They have where you can sell links, so you don't have to have internet at the location. And you can place them inside to detect motion and at least be able to see, are they trying to move stuff in or whatnot, and act on it quickly. Because if you call the police while they're in the act, like you were saying, you stopped the act. But once they're in and change the locks or whatever, the police are, it's a civil matter. You got to evict, or that's new law if it is. But yeah, and on the corollary of that, what we're seeing where the tenants of these scammers, they seem to have known in the ones I've had to evict, because we're like, hey, I'm sorry you got scammed, but give us an application and let's talk about this. Maybe you can be the new tenants, or at least we can work with you to to move this out for both sides instead of going through the eviction process. And right away they start playing games or won't respond, and it's like, that looks really bad. Makes me think that you knew this, but you wouldn't have had with it anyways. And it's one of those, if it's too good to be true, then obviously it is. If you're paying $1,000 for everything else is going for $2,000 or $3,000 in the neighborhood, you've got some culpability there too for not asking questions.
100%. And places like, we don't market on Facebook or Craigslist, which is where these scams are generally happening. And when this started happening, I had a thought of, well, maybe I should just start posting these on Facebook and Craigslist, because at least I'm there first. Like they can't scam it because the listing already exists, right? And we tried that for a little bit, but what we found is that on those forums, those people are going to people who can't go the normal route of using a realtor or going through Zillow, et cetera, which is a more professional, certainly in the Austin market, a more professional way of doing that. These people who have bad credit, maybe have an eviction on their record or X, Y, and Z, that's where they go to lease homes. And so it is these guys are the people who are doing this fraudulently, are preying on people who already know they're in a bad situation. And, it's not helping them at all to do that, because it just makes their bad situation worse in a lot of cases, which I think is just horrible. But it's a sad reality of the situation, because obviously if you had an eviction, I wouldn't place you in my home. So what do you got to do?
Right.
But that's what we've seen on those specific websites, and Facebook even seems not very scary until you start looking through all those places for lease, and it's pretty obvious what you can find as scams. You'll see like $1,000 of rent in downtown Austin, like in the 78704 area code. And it's like, there's just no way 1 bedrooms, 1 baths in that zip code. Absolutely not. That's 3,000. It's like with a pool, it's really, really obvious.
Right.
Well, Richard, we've come towards the end of our time here on the podcast. Is there anything that you think we should cover that our audience would be interested in learning about?
Probably lots, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. So be careful. I'm always happy to answer any questions, especially if you can email or text me. I'd rather prevent things than have to address it. Like I say often, I'd be happy for my area of practice to go away and have to find a new area. I'm happy not to get paid. Not meaning don't pay me, but I'm
Correct.
happy when tenants want to work out or they move out and we don't have to file an eviction. I'm happy not to go to court. I'd rather be here, working on the cases that we have than spending the time having to go to court and get it done. So upfront is the number one. I would love to see on the landlord side as a landlord advocate, double deposits and things like that just aren't as feasible in the marketplace. I can understand that. But if you have that, then at least as soon as there's an issue, you can act on it. The other thing is right now we're still dealing with the CARES Act. I've had a couple people recently try to fight me about that. No, that went away back in 2020 or 21 or whatever. It's still here. It's 100% here. We have access to a program that'll run it to tell me if the mortgage is. And that's the other thing people don't understand is it doesn't matter what type of mortgage you have. You can have conventional where you put 25% down, no PMI or anything like that, and it can still be federally backed. And that's the one area I don't play games, as I've already said. If I see that, you might be able to find another attorney who doesn't know how to run those reports, and thus, if the court doesn't ask the question, then they can get away with it. Or if they ask, they don't even know. I comply with everything. The judges know that. They know that I'm not playing games. So when the tenants start bashing me in court, I just kind of chuckle a little bit and like not sending the notice to vacate. Why would I? It's $5 to mail this. Why would I have not done that? Especially when we have proof of it. So upfront is the number one. Know who you're running from. Get as much information. If you've got the time, go visit where they worked. Go visit their current home. I understand that's not feasible in most of these, but at least one in person to check the ID, I think would help a lot. And the initial payment, making sure that's verified funds cannot go back, which means meeting at the bank if you need to get that cashier check, cash or wire or something very of that level.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. And you reminded me something on the double deposits thing. There was actually a landlord. It wasn't in Austin. It was another property manager. I'm forgetting where I heard this, but what they turned to was actually doing double deposits, but then lowering their credit score requirements. And they've actually felt that it's helped them. It's helped them fill vacancies a lot, just because if they've got that much cash on them and you can collateralize yourself like that, it's worth the risk. And it hasn't really been a risk. So I'm interested, where did you get that 2 times deposit theory?
Yeah. So I did some property management, dabbled in it myself. I just didn't have the facility to, I can do some of the repairs, but obviously I'm better used elsewhere. So, getting that backing or whatnot, and just the time of having to deal with all those things, my efforts are better elsewhere. So that's where I saw the double deposit, and I'm 100% on board with whoever that was. I would much rather have somebody with a lower credit score. One, they're unlikely to, move on, go find another place. So, you're longer term, so less effort on the property management side of finding new tenants or whatever. Smoother that way. They also seem more thankful. And like you said, if they have that double deposit, then, I know at least before COVID, if we needed to evict, normally that's 1 month unless they appeal. So we have 1 month's rent, and then we have some money for damages. So the harm is less there, that versus most of the time you have one deposit, if that. And by the time we finish evicting, if you got started right away, you've got nothing for damages.
Right. No, I'm 100% agreement with you, because if they're going to play games after you have 2 months of rent already in hand, you're much better off to be able to sit there and fight that battle with that much cash to be able to collateralize yourself. And yeah, I 100% agree. Richard, thank you for being on the Leasing Austin podcast. If someone wanted to reach out to you for your services or just your expertise, how would they get a hold of you?
Right now, we are only available via text and email. Unfortunately, for the last 3 years, just no phone calls.
Keep it in
Maybe we'll
writing.
get back to that.
That's
It helps. Well, and it helps me when I'm on a case too, because then I can go back, I can review everything quickly and know I've got all of the facts when I'm going into trial. So phone number with text message ability, 512-843-8955, or richard@cahanlaw.com. That's CAHAN.
Well, that's fantastic. This is Thomas Talbert with Prime Properties signing off. Leasing Austin. Richard, thank you again so much for your time, and I hope to not talk to you soon, but I imagine sadly I will.
I completely sympathize and understand. Have a good one
Cheers.
and happy New Year.
Bye.